Welcome to another interesting session with HemiScope. My name is Christine Hunefeldt, and I am the director for the Center of Iberian and Latin American Studies. Today, we have the enormous privilege of talking to one of the most outstanding social scientists in Latin America, Rodrigo Montoya. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Christine.
Rodrigo Montoya is a university professor at the National University in Lima, and he has been doing research over the last 50 years on Andean peasants in the Andean region. But he has not only written books, many books indeed, a total of 22 by now, but he has also been very actively involved in peasant and indigenous issues in the Andean countries. So, Rodrigo, let me ask you a question to start out with. You have developed many very interesting and fascinating ideas about how to understand indigenous populations in the Andes. From the many ideas you have developed, which one would you take on with you for the rest of your life? What is the most important thing you have been thinking about?
Maybe since 1492, with the Spaniards arrived to America, the Indian people is trying to reach a condition as person, a condition of citizen, of equal to rest of society. With Spanish conquest, Indian people has suffered the more important war against them. And we know with work of many historians that this war has signified for Indians to reduce their population in the Inca Empire from 9 million of inhabitants to only 1 million in 1 century. That means that social transformation, that social almost revolution lived by Indian people has been very strong. In the 5 centuries, the Indian has tried to recover their independence, their possibility of living their lives without peace. And it was very impossible for them until now. After the conquest, the Indian people has appealed to religion. In 1575, the Indians in Ayacucho has thought that local gods, the mountain gods, maybe help them for resist against the Spanish and for accept their condition of social domination. 2 centuries after, with Tupac Amaru rebellion, the first national revolution against the Spanish Empire, Indian people has revolted for trying to organize another society and come back to Cusco as a capital of Peruvian kingdom.
Which was the capital of the Inca Empire as well.
It was the first capital, the more important place, sacred place, religious place, political place for them. But the Spanish have formed a new capital in Lima, so far from Cusco, because the Spanish had fear from Indians, fear from Cusco. Unfortunately, this revolution has been defeated, and Indian people has lost 100,000 persons, and all our history is marked by this constant diminution of population, and 2 centuries after the Tupac Amaru conquest, Indian people begin to reconquest their unity, their possibility of be a independent people. In 1990, in Ecuador, the Indian people has taken Quito, claiming in the first time in their history their right to be equal condition to rest of Ecuadorian people. In the same year in Bolivia, the Amazonian Indians have walked from Amazonian region to La Paz, capital of Bolivia, claiming for be recognized as Bolivian citizens. By the first time in their history, the Indians have arrived to La Paz. And in La Paz, Bolivians of La Paz have discovered that in their same country, other people, Indian Amazonian people, have existence. And in 1994, in Mexico, near to United States, the Zapatistas have presented a new possibility for Indian people in Latin America, trying to obtain for Mexico country a new situation and with new ideas, political new ideas, with new language for talk about Mexican situation, about Indian people, about classical domination in Latin America. My more important idea is in these 5 centuries, the Indian people has trying to fight for obtain be recognized as citizens in our countries.
It sounds like a very long-term history of continued indigenous vindications, and somehow it seems that the Andean countries and in Mexico, as you just mentioned, it is not only indigenous populations that are on the foreground, but they are very successful in proposing different political structures, a different political language, and much of this new political language is very much phrased in their own traditional cultures. So there's kind of a cultural matrix to it. What I would like you to talk a little bit about is, I mean, we tend to talk about indigenous movements overall, but there are very different national realities. So what is different in terms of the indigenous movement, say in Ecuador, in Bolivia, in Peru, and if you want to even compare it a little bit to Mexico?
Yes. Until to 1970, only in the last 35 years, Indian people was reduced to condition of invisible people. They didn't have a recognition as citizen, and they were considered as, in some cases, not human people. In contrast, as animals. This is a legacy, an heritage from Hispanic
from colonial
period,
times. Yeah.
Hispanic colonial. But since 1970, 1970 appears in Latin America a new political subject. The Indian people begin to organize a new political movement, independent from the classical parties, independent from the classical political formation. And this possibility is a result by some special reasons. The first is the Indian intellectuals appear as new people in our world. It was classical in our countries that the Indians didn't have the possibility for go to high school, to university, but in Equatorian case, with the help of one part of Catholic Church, the Indians of Amazonian Equatorian region have learned to talk Spanish, to write, to read, and 20 years after, in the beginning, in the 80s year, in the 80 decade, in Ecuador, we have a new generation of intellectuals. One Indian intellectual means a person who is bilingual, who talk very good Spanish, he talk very good their own language, and maybe in some cases trilingual, with universitarian formation, with a sentiment, with a identity, and these people has a critical vision of their countries. They have revisited all their histories, and they have arrived to conclusion that in the political system it lacks a point of view, an Indian point of view. And they have decided form an ethnical organization first, and after, when the ethnical organization has been very good installed in Ecuador, in 1995, Equatorian Indians have formed, by the first time in their history, one political party, a movement named Pachacuti. And they have decided to participate in Equatorian political system. Between 1999 to right now, in 20 years, Equatorian Indian people has reached a presence, a political presence, and they become now a new subject in Equatorian politics. Now anyone in Ecuador can right now ignore the Indian participation, the Indian people. In the case of Bolivia, the situation is some different. Bolivia has lived an important revolution in 1952. And with this revolution, Indian people has received all the land for them, and a transformation of political system. But the Indian people was in other side. It was in the name of Indians that mestizo people, white people, gave a policy for Indians.
So what you mean, it was not a self-generated fight for the land in Bolivia, right? So it was something that was given to them rather than conquered by the indigenous population.
The Indians have participated, have exiged the land, but they didn't participate in the political system. After the war with Paraguay in 1935, Bolivian nation has discovered that Indian was a part of Bolivian nation. And discovering this new fact, the movement Nacionalista Revolucionario, who has led the revolution in 1952, has offered to Indians a land reform. But 10 years after, the same Indians has claimed, and they have said, we are the Indians, we need to be Indians, we need continue to participate in our country, and they have formed a very rich movement named the Catarismo, with the name of a classical Indian who led the rebellion in the side with Tupac Amaru in 1782. And the Catarismo was a very rich movement, and in Bolivia, young people, Aymara people, consider that Bolivia is an incomplete nation, that Bolivia is a country only for the white Bolivians, for the European Bolivians, and not for classical Indian. And they are asking, they are organizing a very good movement, trying to recognize the existence of Aymara nation. It's in this direction that Evo Morales, with experience, with intelligence, with sensibility, he has unified one political sentiment coming from classical Bolivian political system with the new needs from Indian people.
Rodrigo, I find it very interesting how you analyze the differences in terms of national situations, in terms of Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, and Mexico. And certainly, I mean, these differences in terms of how the indigenous movements have grown have led to very different political outlets. We have Evo Morales today in Bolivia, and we probably have Ollanta Humala, who claims himself also to be the representative of the indigenous populations in Peru. How do you see this process?
There are many differences between the Bolivian and Peruvian cases. Evo Morales come from a peasant experience and from classical political system in Bolivia. He has unified in one very special political movement. In one side, the Indian people in El Alto, and in the other side, the people in the Amazonian region, and the classical peasant people, and urban in La Paz, in Cochabamba, in Santa Cruz. This is the first time in our countries that one movement appears with new characteristics, with special Indian indigenous presence in the politics. In the Peruvian case, Humala, he's a chief of army, a military. And he has one discourse in favor of Indian people, but he hasn't any local organization, any indigenous organization. He's a leader of one movement who is appearing in this moment, and we don't know really where he wants to go. It's impossible to know it, But we are sure that in the Peruvian case, we don't have a presence of an indigenous movement with force, with political initiative like in Bolivia. The explanation is very complex. I must talk only about one reason. In my point of view, the first is the absence in the Peruvian case right now, of Indian intellectuals. This is a paradox because Peru has produced in 70, 80 the most important Indian intellectual, Tupac Amaru. He talked Latin, he talked Spanish, he talked Quechua. He had a fantastic economic experience working with trade between north of Argentina, all Bolivia, and Cusco and the central region of Peru. And he has produced the more important critic to Spanish system. And he has formed a movement with a clear idea of expulse to Spanish and retake the classical Inca system. The more subversive proposition of Tupac Amaru was recognize Cusco as capital of Peru, not only as capital of Inca Empire. But unfortunately, Tupac Amaru has defeated. And with the defeat of Tupac Amaru, Peruvian Indian movement have lost. And 2 centuries after this defeat, the possibilities for recover this capacity is even very, very difficult.
Rodrigo, it sounds like there is a very strong indigenous movement coming up. I mean, even if there are some differences, very notorious differences between each of the Andean countries. But one of my concerns, and we have a couple more minutes to answer that, what are the possibilities of a fractioning of the indigenous movement? I mean, when we're talking Indian movements, we're talking about many different kinds of Indians. I mean, we have highland Indians, lowland Indians, and we have different ethnic identities and even languages. And I see there is a potential. I mean, even if you gain more power, if you gain more political access, that at the end it may kind of corrode from inside. How do you see that possibility in the future?
The possibility of union and force of Indian political movement depends of political formation in the leadership, in one hand. In the other hand, depends too of the real Indian capacity for not to accept the corruption temptation coming from power. Ecuador has showed one last example with one political alliance with Colonel Gutierrez, the last president of Ecuador. Indian leadership has participated in the power in the state. And the power in the state has the possibility for the charm of power, the temptation of power. Have a salary, have money, have a political position. It's very important for people who has never had some position in the past. Maybe the young people in Ecuador is now thinking about this problem and trying to resolve the problem. I think that Indian division, Indian differences may be unified, may be considered not as a problem but as a possibility for the future, if they produce a new movement with bases in Ecuador, in Bolivia, in Peru, in Colombia, in Venezuela, in Chile too, with Indian people, with globalization, with internet, with emails, the possibility of travel for ideas, for people, are very strong right now.
Well, Rodrigo, I truly hope that your optimism finds a lot of political resonance from now and in the future. Thank you so much for being with us here. Thank you for spending these last minutes with us. I'm Christine Hunefeldt with the Center for Iberian Latin American Studies, HemiScope. Thanks.